Welcome to Let's Recap, your ultimate destination for movie enthusiasts. Join us as we dissect the mesmerizing world of Watchmen, exploring its captivating storyline, complex characters, and thought-provoking themes. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and never miss a recap of your favorite films.
Before the credits, a middle-aged man in a bathrobe and a cigar sits alone in his apartment, watching the McLaughlin Group on PBS discuss a possible nuclear war with Russia. A tall, slim figure enters the room. The two begin to fight. After exchanging blows, the assailant clearly has the upper hand and throws the man in the bathrobe out his high-rise window. When he falls to the ground, he is killed, and a smiley face button falls next to his body. As Bob Dylan's Times They Are a Changin' plays over the opening credits, historical images are shown. In America, masked and costumed vigilantes fight crime. In the 1930s and 1940s, vigilantes banded together as the Minutemen to finish what the law couldn't. The original lineup was heroic, aiding in the capture of criminals and the victory of World War II. However, they frequently died in action too soon and violently, committed suicide, were arrested for breaking the law themselves, or were committed to an asylum in one case. We see a blue, otherworldly man shaking hands with President Kennedy. Later, we see a cigar-puffing man holding a rifle on the grassy knoll after Kennedy is shot, who may be the bathrobed man from the beginning of the film, a little younger. And, instead of an American flag, we see the blue man with a camera through the glass of the astronaut's helmet on the moon's surface. The Watchmen, a new generation of heroes, have emerged. We see them being photographed. As the film progresses, we learn that they are the comedian, a burly guy with a simple mask over his eyes and chomping on a cigar, Laurie Jupiter, the new Silk Spectre, Dr. John Osterman, Dr. Manhattan, the naked blue humanoid with true superpowers, Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias, whose costume is similar to that of a Greek god, Daniel Dryberg, the new knight, in a trench coat and hat with a knitted mask that completely covers his face and displays constantly changing ink blots. According to television news, Nixon has been elected for a third term. By the 1980s, public opinion had shifted against costumed heroes, who were viewed as a risky alternative to police. The date is October 12, 1985. Rorschach enters the crime scene apartment with a sophisticated grappling gun to investigate the murder of the man who fell to his death at the start of the film, who we now know as Eddie Blake. He discovers the uniform, weapons, and memorabilia of the comedian, a former member of both the Minutemen and the Watchmen, while searching the apartment. What Rorschach will write in his journal is voiced over: "A comedian died in New York tonight. Someone is aware of the reason." To get out of the building, he has to beat up a couple of cops. Meanwhile, Daniel Dryberg is at the home of the original Night Owl, Hollis Mason. They meet on a regular basis to catch up on old times. According to Hollis, it all started with the gangs. The Minutemen were a masked counterattack to the masked gangs. They talk about the comedian's death and Rorschach's vigilantism. Nixon's policies forbid masked vigilantes, but Rorschach is undeterred. As Daniel walks away, they see a news report about Rorschach and the cops on television. Daniel walks home in the rain, only to discover that Rorschach has broken into his house and is in his kitchen. Rorschach shows Daniel the smiley face button he discovered near the site of the comedian's death. They go down to the Night Owl lab, which is located beneath Daniel's house, where Rorschach suspects that someone is killing the superheroes. The Watchmen are over, Daniel says, and Rorschach could give up because no one knows who he is. Rorschach speculates in his journal that nuclear war is imminent. Adrian Veidt, the wealthy and brilliant businessman, is being interviewed. Only Adrian and Hollis have ever revealed their true identities, according to the reporter. Adrian discusses the development of renewable energy sources and how the war would be rendered obsolete if he could eliminate the fear of not having enough. Daniel is watching the interview and warns Adrian that the Watchmen may be in danger. Adrian is unconcerned. Adrian speculates that a being like Dr. Manhattan, with his atomic structure controlling abilities, might be able to prevent some of a nuclear strike, but not all of it. Rorschach sneaks into the U.S. Army Rockefeller Military Research Center the next evening to warn Dr. Manhattan and Laurie Jupiter, who live in private quarters there. Manhattan can normally see the future, but he claims that he can't see it right now due to temporal interference caused by tachyons moving through time, which could be the result of a nuclear holocaust. When he upsets Laurie, he transports, zaps, Rorschach outside the military facility in mid-sentence. Rorschach questions Laurie's judgment of the comedian, who once tried to rape her mother. The incident is referred to as a moral lapse by Rorschach. Manhattan then informs Laurie that he has been collaborating with Adrian to solve the energy crisis in order to avoid war. Manhattan reads her mind and witnesses her parents arguing. We see this same scene repeated twice more in the movie. He also informs Laurie that he knows she wanted to have dinner with him, but she will instead dine with Daniel. Daniel is clearly smitten when Laurie walks into the restaurant. They eat dinner and reminisce about the good old days. She observes that the Keene Act, which made costumed vigilantism illegal, has prevented them from dressing up as superheroes. Laurie admits that John, Dr. Manhattan, is becoming increasingly distant. Daniel notices a government escort watching her as she boards a cab to leave the restaurant. They don't want her upsetting the country's most valuable asset, she responds. The comedian is laid to rest in a cemetery with military honors, while Simon and Garfunkel's Sounds of Silence plays. Dr. Manhattan teleports Laurie to her mother's house, where she immediately pukes in the toilet. Sally Jupiter, the older woman, observes that she expected Laurie to be accustomed to that mode of transportation by now. It's better than flying coach, Sally says. She's drinking margaritas in the afternoon and reminiscing about her days as the original Silk Spectre with the Minutemen. She shows Laurie a pornographic comic book based on Sally's 1940s superhero, the original Silk Spectre. Laurie is shocked by her mother's actions. Sally recalls the original Minutemen having a group photo taken in a wood-paneled club in a flashback. Sally then goes to the billiards room to change out of her costume, and the comedian walks in, making suggestive moves toward her. Sally tries to push him away, but the comedian punches her brutally and is about to rape her when another member of their team, Hooded Justice, intervenes and severely beats Blake. Blake suggests that Justice starts beating men and then stops. Sally wraps up the flashback with a cryptic remark about Eddie Blake. Dr. Manhattan and Daniel have returned to the Rainy Cemetery. During the Vietnam War, the comedian and Manhattan fought the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army, turning the tide of the war and allowing the U.S. to win. As the war comes to an end, a Vietnamese woman approaches the comedian in a bar and informs him that she is pregnant with his child. When the drunken comedian refuses to accept responsibility for his actions and insults her, she slashes his face with a broken bottle, leaving a permanent scar. The comedian shoots and kills the woman, despite Manhattan's pleas for him to stop. Blake then chastises Manhattan for failing to stop him, claiming that his failure to act demonstrates Manhattan's lack of concern for humanity. Adrian also witnesses the coffin's burial and recalls a Watchmen meeting. He remembers the comedian as a sarcastic, misanthropic pessimist, whereas Ozymandias desired to help humanity. The comedian destroys Adrian's display, claiming that the threat of nuclear war outweighs any efforts by Adrian's proposed crimebusters group. Daniel recalls the comedian and the night owl attempting to calm a rioting group of protesters during a police strike. The comic gleefully fought with the protesters and fired tear gas at them. Daniel, clearly disturbed by the state of lawlessness in the country, asks the comedian, "What happened to the American dream?" The comedian responds, "In the midst of the mob's devastation it became a reality. You're staring at it." Blake also mentions that Congress is considering new legislation that would make costumed vigilantes illegal. A tall, wise man pays his respects and returns to his apartment near an adult movie theater. He is Moloch, a archenemy from the past. Rorschach assaults him in his home, demanding to know why Moloch went to the funeral. Eddie Blake broke into Moloch's house a week before, very drunk, and cried and rambled about a list, according to Moloch. Laurie and John are having a private erotic moment when Laurie notices John has duplicated himself. She is initially put off by making love to two people at the same time, but she soon realizes that a third John is also working on the energy design. She throws an object through the blue figure's head, enraged at not having his full attention. Laurie departs as John teleports the machine to Adrian's Antarctic stronghold, Karnak. Laurie arrives at Daniel's house, claiming that she has nowhere else to go. He plans to meet with Hollis for their weekly session and invites her to come along. John puts on a suit and tie, without touching his clothes, and zaps himself to a television studio for an interview. At the same time, Dan and Laurie are confronted by a large gang of street thugs as they walk to Hollis. They defend themselves vehemently while dressed in their street clothes. At the same time, Manhattan is accused of infecting many of his former colleagues with cancer during the interview. Janie Slater, his ex-girlfriend, appears and reveals that she, too, is afflicted, and she publicly condemns John. John screams, "Leave me alone," and zaps everyone out of the studio during the ensuing press scrum. Laurie and Daniel's fight with the thugs come to an end, and she decides not to go on to Hollis. Daniel and Hollis are watching the end of Manhattan's interview on TV. According to Hollis, Manhattan was crucified in front of a national audience. Dr. Manhattan travels to Mars via teleportation. He recalls many events in a jumbled order there. He had a loving relationship with Janie years ago, he reassembled a watch with his father, he was trapped in an atomic chamber by a time lock before a lab accident transformed him from John Osterman, a human scientist, into Dr. Manhattan, and how he fell in love with Laurie. Manhattan is gradually resurrected, first as a nervous system, then as a skeleton, and finally as a blue humanoid. Superman exists, and he is an American, according to TV news. When Dr. Manhattan is told he needs a logo, he draws a circle with a dot in the center on his forehead, representing a hydrogen atom. President Nixon enlists his assistance in ending the Vietnam War, which he accomplishes. The TV reporter now denies saying the Superman quote. Instead, he says that his words are God exists and he's an American. Dr. Manhattan observes that he is tired of humans and begins to construct a large, watch-like device on Mars. Laurie is confronted by government officials for not doing her job, physically and emotionally appeasing Dr. Manhattan, and allowing him to leave Earth. In a flashback, she meets the comedian while dressed as the Silk Spectre. Her mother steps in and tells him to keep his distance from her daughter. Nixon, Kissinger, and the War Cabinet discuss recent events with the Soviet Union and plan for war. Nixon appears willing to lose the East Coast in a nuclear war with the Soviets, and he orders the fueling of America's bomber planes to begin. Nixon says Dr. Manhattan has 2 days to solve the problems, and he hopes he's on our side. Laurie informs government officials that the only person who can bring John back is himself. Lee Iacocca and other business leaders have a contentious meeting with Adrian. Adrian reminds them of his brilliance and his desire to unify the world like Alexander the Great. He also claims to be wealthy enough to buy them multiple times over and tells them they are free to leave. The elevator door opens as Iacocca apologizes, and a deliveryman begins shooting. Veidt manages to avoid the bullets, one of which hits Iacocca between the eyes and subdues the shooter, but the man swallows a poison pill, froths at the mouth, and dies. Laurie and Daniel talk about the attack over lunch at the Gunga Diner. Daniel warns the former heroes that it is unsafe for them to leave the diner, and as they leave, he suggests Laurie move in with him for safety. She agrees, and they leave the restaurant. We hear Rorschach's voiceover, in which he says he is watching them walk away while not dressed in his costume. Rorschach later examines the ID card of the man who attempted to murder Adrian. The man worked for Pyramid International, and Rorschach recalls seeing a pyramid letter earlier at Malek's apartment. He returns to Malek's apartment, only to find that Malek has died so recently that his cigarette is still smoldering. The police have surrounded the building and know Rorschach is inside. Rorschach, realizing he's been set up for the murder, constructs a torch from a spray can and fights his way out of the building. Regardless, he is apprehended and unmasked. Walter Kovacs, age 35, is identified on TV news. Walter is imprisoned for the murder of Malek until his trial. Dr. Malcolm Long, the state psychiatrist, tells Walter that he will not want to be in the general population because criminals he has apprehended will want vengeance. He conducts a psychological evaluation on Walter. Walter recalls events from his life as he examines ink blots. He witnesses his mother kissing a man at a young age. She slaps him and declares, "I should have had that abortion." A young Walter also seriously injures much bigger kids who are taunting him. Walter is offended by the psychiatrist's use of the name Walter, and he complains about how evil society is. He recalls a watershed moment when, as a young Rorschach, he discovered the heinous murder of a 6-year-old girl by a pedophile. He finds a cleaver at the crime scene and brutally cleaves the murderer's head in two with multiple blows. He informs Long that Walter died that night, leaving only Rorschach. "I can't help him," Long says as he walks away. In prison, Walter is taunted by another inmate on the food service line, and Walter responds by splashing him with hot grease from a deep fryer, severely burning him. "I'm not locked up in here with you, you're locked up in here with me," screams Rorschach to the rest of the population. Laurie snoops around Daniel's building's basement and discovers the Night Owl's lab and a flying machine. She presses a random button, activating the ship's flamethrower and setting fire to the lab. Daniel arrives to assist her in putting out the fire. He explains that the ship's name is Archie, after Merlin's pet owl, Archimedes. He claims he inherited a large sum of money from his father, who was disappointed that he became a criminal. Daniel describes Hollis as his hero to Laurie. She puts on the night vision owl goggles and claims that this is how John sees. Daniel walks upstairs, disappointed. John sees a lot of things, but he doesn't see me, Laurie says as she follows him. Daniel notices that the two are going too fast as they make love on the sofa. Laurie claims they have all of the time in the world. In the background, a newscast reports on the buildup of Soviet tanks. Rorschach is locked up in his cell when he is taunted by a dwarf, Big Figure, a crime lord he arrested 15 years before who is now out for vengeance. Big Figure tells Kovacs that he can stay in his cell for as long as he needs to. In his strange dream, Daniel and Laurie are naked on a field under the stars. As a nuclear explosion vaporizes them, she pulls off their skin, revealing their superhero costumes. Laurie finds him awake, staring at his night owl gear. The two decide to get into costume, take Archie out, and do something stupid. Archie flies around the city looking for police messages. They hear about a burning building and rush to help a group of people who are trapped on an upper floor. Night Owl throws her into the burning building and then lines up Archie as she throws all of the trapped people into the ship, just as an explosion would have killed them all. Daniel puts the flyer on autopilot after dropping off the passengers, and the two superheroes have steamy sex in the aircraft. Meanwhile, there is a prison riot. Behind the bars, one of the dwarf's large henchmen tries to grab Kovacs. Rorschach grabs the man's hands and binds them to the bars. Another henchman arrives with a grinder and proceeds to cut off the other's arms before cutting open Rorschach's cell bars. We cut to Laurie and Daniel after they have made love. They make the decision to try to free Rorschach from prison. Rorschach quickly subdues the grinder man against the cell toilet, and the dwarf flees for his life. Silk Spectre and Night Owl return to the prison, where a full-fledged prisoner revolt is underway. Meanwhile, Rorschach rushes to the psychiatrist's office to obtain his mask. Silk Spectre and Night Owl arrive and use fists and kicks to subdue dozens of prisoners. As Silk Spectre and Night Owl find Rorschach, we see the dwarf run into the men's bathroom to hide. "Excuse me, I have to use the men's room," he says as he walks away. We see Big Figure through the swinging door for a brief moment, and we see water and blood running on the floor after Rorschach leaves. Night Owl and Laurie are having a good time in Daniel's basement lair. Dr. Manhattan appears and transports Laurie to Mars. She doubles over and vomits as he says how lovely it is. Night Owl and Rorschach go out again and discover that Janie Slater, a pyramid employee, hired Adrian Veidt's assassin. They make the decision to follow the money. Sally calls Hollis, who informs her that Night Owl and Silk Spectre have rescued the people trapped in the burning building. They take pleasure in their protégé's happiness. Following that, young thugs break into Hollis' apartment, knowing he was the original Night Owl. He fights bravely, but he is killed. Rorschach and Night Owl argue, but Rorschach extends his hand in friendship, and they agree to go out in costume in search of the person who attempted to murder Adrian. They learn from the news that Hollis has been murdered, and Night Owl brutally beats up a gang member despite the fact that he has no idea who killed Hollis. Manhattan tells Laurie what she's going to tell him on Mars, and she remarks that the most powerful thing in the universe is just going through the motions. She apologizes for sleeping with Dan, and Manhattan appears to be unconcerned. "My red world here means more than your blue world," he says as his machine appears behind them. Nixon directs DEF CON 1 to send the bombers from the war room. Adrian's office is broken into by Rorschach and Night Owl. Night Owl deduces that Adrian's computer password is Ramesses 2, and they discover that Pyramid is owned by Adrian's company, Veidt International. A group of scientists raises a glass to Manhattan's energy reactor, which is now operational, at Karnak in Antarctica. As he steps over their poisoned bodies, Adrian, dressed as Ozymandias, compares the scientists to the Egyptian servants who were buried with their pharaoh. He then disintegrates them in a manner similar to John Osterman's accident. Back in New York, Rorschach keeps a journal and drops it through the mail slot in the door of the New Frontier newspaper. Laurie begs for help for Earth from Mars. Manhattan says that the universe will not even notice and that life is overrated. He wonders how another oil pipeline or shopping mall will improve things. She requests that he return her to Earth to be fried with her mother and Daniel. She dares Manhattan to do that thing you do and confronts her with details of her life she prefers not to recall. Manhattan, probing her memories, reveals that her mother eventually had a romantic relationship with the comedian, despite his previous attempt to rape her. When Blake is revealed to be her biological father, she is devastated, saying, "My life is just one big joke." She destroys Manhattan's watch-like machine, and Manhattan creates a protective field around them both, shielding them from the debris. Manhattan tells her that he was mistaken in underestimating miracles. He notes that against unfathomable odds Laurie came from the coupling of Sally and the comedian, a miracle. The camera pulls back from Mars, revealing that they are standing on the planet's surface in the shape of a giant smiley face. Rorschach and Night Owl fly south to Karnak, in Antarctica, where Archie, who has been underwater in New York for many hours, freezes from the water still in it and crashes lands. As Ozymandias watches Rorschach and Night Owl hiking in the snow towards Karnak on one of the dozens of televisions arrayed before him, Jimi Hendrix's All Along the Watchtower plays. Other televisions broadcast news and other information from around the world. Rorschach and Night Owl sneak in, believing he is unaware of their presence. He is, in fact, fully aware. They confront Ozymandias, attempting to subdue him through hand-to-hand combat, but he easily defeats both of them. Because he was cracking badly and had discovered Ozymandias' plan, Veidt confirms he is the mastermind behind the comedian's murder. He also spent $2 billion to trick Manhattan into not seeing the future and leaving Earth, staged Rorschach's assassination attempt, and staged his own assassination attempt to put himself above suspicion. He explains that his plan is to unite the US and the Soviet Union and prevent nuclear war by killing millions in several of the world's most populous cities in order to save billions. Veidt intends to destroy the cities using devices with Dr. Manhattan's distinct energy signature. The world will believe Dr. Manhattan is to blame for all the deaths and will band together to stop the impending nuclear war. Rorschach and Night Owl try to stop him, but Ozymandias tells them that he will only reveal his plan if they can't stop it. In fact, he had begun the destruction 35 minutes before. They can see the cities being destroyed on TV monitors. Henry Kissinger informs Nixon that the energy signatures are not from Soviet nuclear devices, but rather from Dr. Manhattan. Laurie and Manhattan arrive in New York City's ruins to see the results of Ozymandias' plan. Manhattan observes that the destruction was designed to appear as if I did it. They travel to Karnak to face Ozymandias. Laurie pulls out a gun and shoots Ozymandias as he appears to obliterate Manhattan. He falls down the stairs but then realizes he caught the bullet and is unharmed. Manhattan reappears, telling Veidt that he was able to reassemble himself more easily and quickly, having learned how to do so from the first accident that claimed his life. The world's smartest man is no more dangerous to me than the world's smartest termite. Ozymandias reveals a television remote control, and all of the televisions are turned on to a broadcast of Nixon blaming Manhattan for the destruction. After President Nixon declares that the United States and the Soviet Union have allied, Dr. Manhattan realizes that Ozymandias' plan is logical and that revealing the conspiracy would only disrupt the peace and lead to nuclear war. Rorschach is unable to remain silent and angrily turns to leave, adamant that a crime has been committed and that the world must be informed. Manhattan says he understands Adrian's feelings about killing millions of innocent people to save the planet without condoning or condemning it. Rorschach is confronted by Manhattan outside. Rorschach, in despair, removes his mask and demands that Manhattan murders him. Manhattan eventually agrees, leaving only a bloody outline in the snow. Daniel, a witness, cries out in pain. Manhattan kisses Laurie goodbye before departing for another galaxy a little less difficult. Maybe I'll bring some life to that place. Daniel returns to the building after witnessing Manhattan murder Rorschach and attacks Adrian, telling him that he has deformed mankind. Adrian is emotionless as he takes the blows. Daniel and Laurie take off in Archie. As Laurie speaks with her mother, we hear the beginning of an episode of The Outer Limits. She informs her mother that she is aware that the comedian is her father, and they make amends. Daniel appears and informs Archie that he has been updated and is ready. As long as people think John is still watching, Daniel observes, we'll be fine. Life goes on outside. Because of the world's peace, a newspaper editor in New York complains that there is nothing worthwhile to print. He tells Seymour, a young reporter, that it's like living in a global hippie commune where the only hamburgers available are Russian variations, borscht. The reporter suggests that they write a story about Ronald Reagan, who is considering running for president. Americans don't want a cowboy in the White House, the editor says. Instead, he tells Seymour that he can print whatever he wants from a collection of junk mail. The camera focuses on Rorschach's journal in the mail basket.